Unmute. কিন্তু তাও তো কিছু
Wow, buddy. Whoa. I gotta walk in late like that. That seems like the way to do it. Now you're leaving?
Oh,
No, that door's
no
not
problem.
locked.
Oh. It's a fire code thing. All right. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. I'm gonna shut one of these because there's noise coming in. So I'm getting started right on time because I am. I'm gonna try and do this class in an hour when it's typically closer to 2. So I'm hoping not to cause more confusion by doing this, but I'm gonna move relatively quickly through this. And if I get off track, then you guys can say, Jake, remember you only have so much time. So just remind me. So why are you here?
To be intentional in your business.
Be intentional. I like it. I like that. What else?
volume probably down.
Create clarity.
Okay, I just turn this down.
Make sure I'm focusing on the right thing.
Okay. Could you?
I'll fix it.
I'm just echoing here. Focus on the right things. Okay. On my computer. Right. No. I turned it down. I muted myself. That's so much better. Bethany, thank you so much. All right. So here's kind of the goal for today. Clarity on what's important to you. I think it's super important to understand who you are as an individual and what you're actually looking to accomplish for your own reasons, not for what can happen in this industry, what others or what we think others think we should be doing, or we should be setting a certain goal because this is what the industry is doing, or this is what colleagues of mine are going for. So I think it's super important to understand what is your goal and why is it important. Because if you set a goal that's based on somebody else's opinion or the industry as a whole, I promise you, you're not going to hit it unless you're lucky. Because you're not going to be willing to do the work that's meaningful enough to actually go hit the goal. Does that make sense? So clarity is super important. We're going to walk through the tool itself as well. Asking the hard questions are the valuable questions. An easy conversation is a failed conversation. I've used that often because too often we all do it. We'll ask ourselves the easiest questions and then we'll give ourselves the easiest answers. Yet subconsciously, we already know we're not asking the more difficult questions. Okay. Plan for sprints of discipline. I think this is important. And Jen and I have worked with team leaders, the leadership in particular, that we don't have to make 12-month commitments of intense activity. I think it's super important to identify the activities that align with your strengths that will help you develop business and do it in short-term increments because it actually gives you the best opportunity to create more habits. Rather than having this, I can't do this for that long. Anybody can do anything for a short period of time. And so that's what I'm going to encourage you to really focus on is what are the handful of things, not this laundry list, but a handful of things that you're willing to commit to for a short period of time to give yourself insights on your skill set, to give yourself a runway where you actually can look forward to the end. Like Matt, I just look at Matt, he just did 75 hard. Like if you would ask Matt to do that for 12 months, he'd have been like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. But 75 days is manageable. So I think it's important to understand the value of a sprint versus setting yourself up for not being able to make any adjustments for a long period of time. Okay. Understand the tool and implement it. And then ultimately, if I'm gonna get to the core of what I hope you guys take from this is I want you to find whatever you're willing to take action on. Jen mentioned a post that I said, stop talking. There's a post that I made a few days ago. I don't even know when it was, but we've gotten too accustomed to talking. And if I'm trying to learn about somebody, I'm not listening to their words anymore. I'm watching what they're doing because it tells me so much more. I'm not looking to have a gotcha, but we've got to understand that we can't just keep talking about doing stuff. We've got to identify the handful of things that are meaningful enough that we're willing to take action on, because that's ultimately how we're going to judge ourselves and how other people are going to judge us, whether right, wrong, or indifferent. We've got to find what we're willing to stick to and actually do the work versus anybody know that person that constantly tells you all the things that they're going to do and they don't follow through on it? Do you believe that person?
You don't trust them, and I think you learn to not trust yourself, which is the most.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Like I said, I was gonna do this thing and I didn't follow through. Can I trust that I'm gonna do what I say I'm gonna do? When you do the thing, you build trust with yourself, which is the most important.
So we talk big, have big goals. I'm all for that, everybody. And trust me, you guys have more potential than any of us individually have more potential than we could possibly imagine. But we don't put it in order enough. We try to go all the way so far off of what we're normally doing that we don't even give ourselves a chance to adjust. We've got to make incremental, bless you, incremental improvements. Okay. One of the best ways to build your self-confidence is making promises to yourself and following through on them. There's nothing more powerful than making a promise to yourself and continuously following through on it. So if I can encourage anything, only make the most important promises to yourself. Don't make a bunch of half-ass promises. I'm passionate about this because that's what hurts us. It's when we beat ourselves up. It's when we start judging ourselves, is because we've actually made, and I'll talk about this. There's a challenge when we make halfway commitments, but subconsciously we're telling ourselves that we're fully committed, but then we only give half the effort, but we judge as if we had the full commitment. Is this making sense? It's a detrimental way to approach things. So what I want us to really get clear with today is what really matters to you. I don't care how it compares to anything else, and you shouldn't either. And you shouldn't care what anybody else is either. You're on your own path. Okay? All right. Here's coach with a lot of people. I recruit a fair amount. Here's what I've learned. Most people fall into three categories. One is I don't have goals, and I don't have anything action oriented that I'm going to take a step towards. What they have is our ideas. They have ideas. That's it, but they don't have goals. Second one is I have goals, but they're somewhat arbitrary or ambiguous. I think people lack the skill set to set very specific functional goals. It's more of this concept than it is something that drives action. Okay. And then you have the third, where the goals are very clear, very concise. You can measure them and you know exactly what you're striving to achieve or the activities that you're promising to do yourself. When you look at that list, where do you fall? You don't have to answer. But intuitively, I think you already know your answer. Now it's, if you are where you're at, are you executing it? If you're not where you're at, what steps do you need to take? And hopefully we'll cover some of that today. Okay. What's the purpose of setting a goal?
Reach a desired outcome.
Okay. Have an outcome in mind that you can strive towards. What else?
An action plan to get there.
That's really the only thing that I look at is to create a plan. So we have a goal. Now our job at that point is to reverse engineer an action plan that will allow us to get to that goal. Once we have a plan, the goal doesn't matter. People are confused by this, but once you have a plan, what's your job? Your job is to act on that plan. And I'm going to say this, I don't care if you hit the goal. Because every goal we set, we create a plan, and that plan actually is going to give us information of, is it the right plan or do we make adjustments? And you'll hear me say this a lot. I'm exhausted with the conversation of people saying, goals, they're a negative thing. And actually I had somebody, and I won't bring her name up, but she's like, goals have been a challenge and I haven't really been setting goals. I just want this idea. And what happens is there's such a negative judgment when we don't hit the goals that's when we actually choose not to set them. But the reality is we need a direction. And so how do we set a direction? How do we set goals and then not judge ourselves so harshly if we don't hit it? That's what I'm way more interested in. How do we set goals and give our best effort? And who's the only person that knows if you set your best effort out there? Who's the only person? You. You can fool everybody and say I did my very best. But subconsciously, again, if you didn't. And that's where there's also you got to give yourself grace. So I'm going to talk in opposite. I'm going to contradict myself, and I think that's okay. I think working in absolutes is a problem because it shuts off other ways to look at things. But I think the truth is not hitting a goal doesn't mean it's failure as long as you have progress and you've taken lessons from that process. Because if you hit every single goal, what does that tell you?
Not high enough.
You're sandbagging a little bit. You're like, I know I can hit this, which also doesn't stretch us. When you hit a goal you know you can hit, what's the feeling?
Well, you're still proud.
Nah, it's fine.
Yep.
When you hit a goal, when you're not sure if you were able to hit it, what do you feel? It's different, right? So this isn't about just setting goals. It's just setting goals a little bit out of reach. Gary Keller said, he's like, I've never hit a big goal on time. And hearing it from a guy that is hyper goals driven, that gave me some permission, like, okay, I don't have to hit this every time. Totally cool with that. So give ourselves some compassion before we set the goal, as long as we're committed to the activities. Thoughts on that? Does anybody in here not like the idea of goals? And that's totally fine.
Come to like them. I think a little bit of a reframe when you said, how can we get more interested in the process of the goal setting? Like if you're striving for a goal and giving it all you've got, it is also about who you become. You sort of said this, but okay, I'm coming up against this fear that I didn't know it, or I'm coming up against a skill set I didn't really think that I could hone. And so in the process of striving for a goal, you become somebody different, and that's huge.
Yeah, you have to be.
Yeah.
You can't be the same version and expect different
So
results.
is that a failure then if you don't hit the goal, but then you gained all of this other stuff and you came a little shy of the goal? Absolutely not. It's this huge win. Yeah.
Then why do we judge so harshly? And then you say, screw it, I don't want to set that goal.
Those are the kinds of questions though that you ask yourself, well, why am I judging myself so harshly? Well, is it because I'm afraid other people are judging me? Like those are the questions I think we tend to lean away from, go, ooh, there's something there too. Yeah.
So this has been on my mind. We judge others based on their actions and judge ourselves based on our intent. How do we get really honest with ourselves and our actions versus, well, I had a good intent, I almost hit it. You may have given best effort. I'm not judging it, but I think we all need to answer that question independently. Nobody else gets to answer that question. You're seeing a theme here. Stretch yourself, but don't judge yourself. You're kind of seeing that theme, right? It's that Brene Brown. She's like, if you're not in the ring, I couldn't care less of your opinion. If You're not, what is it? If you're not in the ring getting your ass kicked, then I don't care about your opinion. And I think that's super valid. Like you gotta go in and you gotta get beat up a little bit, figuring things out along the way. And I don't think beat up is a bad term. When we're doing stuff for the first time, we're not gonna be awesome at it. Let's give ourselves a little grace and keep doing it. Okay. All right. Might have touched on a couple of these. Actually, I want to ask a question here. Are you different today than you were 12 months ago? How? How are you different today than you were 12 months ago?
My experience.
Okay. How are you different? And I'm putting you on the spot, obviously.
Okay.
So,
Well, for me, as a newer agent, I'm different because I'm constantly taking in information and learning every single day. And I become a different person when I gain confidence.
well, certainly. And so you're more confident now than you were 12 months ago. Perfect. Part of that question is, are you different in a way that you intended to be different, or is it just a byproduct of you just living? It's another thing that goals allow you to do is if you want to become a certain person, you've got to identify the things that are allow you to become that person or grow into that person. Now, you can become the person you want to become through intention, or you can be the person you end up being through lack of intention. And it gets messy. So this is where it allows you to really just think of who, if you paint yourself out 12 months from now, how do you want to be? Do you want to be more disciplined? Do you want to have more grace? Do you want to have more patience? Do you want to be more committed? Like, you answer those questions today so you can set yourself up to do the things that allow you to become that person. David.
For me, it's been an ongoing pursuit of trying to find out who I am. In other words, to become my authentic self versus everything that I may have layered on or missed.
Yep.
And what I've been studying has shown me that looking at where the person you want to become, ultimately you want to become yourself, not somebody else. So, and by doing that, then you know how everything works, why you keep running into the same brick wall.
Yeah.
Because you're doing something that's against yourself. Once you know it, then you can find a way to work around it.
Yeah.
That's
Well said. This is what I have highlighted. It's critically important to understand yourself well enough, not to just listen to your thoughts and feelings, but be driven by your values and commitment. We all have thoughts and feelings. It's not who we are, though. So be careful of believing every thought or feeling you have as being your advocate. Because we don't always feel like doing the things that we don't want to do. Like the stuff has to get done. Yet we can become the person by not listening to how we feel in the moment, knowing that our commitment and our values line up with that version of ourselves. Emotions and feelings are fleeting. Your values and commitments, if you're going to do anything significant, I'm going to encourage that it's going to take some values and commitments to follow through on getting to where you want to go. It's very intense right now. Everybody's got
Really like good thoughts,
really like,
right? Yeah.
maybe like, people get me out of here. How do I get Matt figured out? Go over here. All right. Oh, that one's changing. That one's not. TV's frozen.
Oh, yeah, because you're still sitting.
Oh,
So is the Zoom.
yeah, it's fine.
Zoom is fine?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go off of that back screen. Sorry. I would like to get that fixed though, because when I pull the tool up, I need it to be up here.
Is your computer frozen? I'm gonna shut that TV off and put it back on, maybe.
All right, for anybody on Zoom, you're probably being driven nuts right now by me. All right, so everybody on Zoom can see it. Why do people choose not to set goals?
Lack of direction or clarity.
Right, lack of clarity. I think that you just don't know what goals to set. What else?
Fear of failure.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that's the main one. It establishes almost a very succinct definition of success or failure, which is a problem. Like if we don't hit a certain metric, does that mean we failed? Not necessarily. I'll go back to the effort conversation. I've gotten to a place where if I set the goal and I create a plan and I do the activities that I believe would get me to the outcome I'm searching for, I don't care what the outcome is. Which sounds very contradicting, knowing that I coach people and I hold people accountable, and they're like, well, how do you hold somebody accountable? I actually am more interested in holding people accountable to the actions and the activities than I am to an outcome. Do we get to control the outcome? We get to influence it, but we do not get to control it. So I want us to give yourself some permission to just go do the activities. And I've never communicated this well, so just hang in there with me. Detach from the outcome. I understand that you set the goal for the outcome. And there's plenty of stuff, and there's plenty of people that will disagree with me on this. Like, how do you detach from the outcome and still care about it? It's like, well, it's not, you can only influence it so much. But I also don't think it's healthy to do all the right things and then beat yourself up over not hitting the exact outcome. That makes it kind of pulls from both ends. Allison.
I've been having a similar thought through a lot of this conversation, and maybe this aligns with what you're trying to say. But when we focus on the goal and not the process, we can either allow ourselves to say whatever's going to happen is going to happen, right? But we can also, when we're attached to the goal and not the process, get to that point, not have made the goal and go, well, it was out of my control, right? But if we focus on the process, we're attached to who we're becoming in the process. We're attached to getting to where we want to go, regardless of whether that initial goal that we set actually comes to fruition, right?
100%. That's well said. And we get to control how we choose to show up along the way.
You know, and you've talked about this in the past where if you fixate on the goal, in other words, that's when I'll be happy. That's when I'll succeed. Versus taking joy and fulfillment in the process. Having the goal there, but if you can get that gratification out of the process, then you're in it.
That's life. That's
life.
That's what you get to enjoy.
You're in it right then. If you're waiting for the goal to make you feel good.
Really short-lived. Then you're living in blips in time.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I covered this at a leadership academy, being outcome-based versus process-based. I think both are important, but you should be spending more of your time in the process than you are focused on just the outcome, because that is what life is made of. And how do you enjoy the process? Take this the right way. How do you get yourself to the point where you enjoy failing?
Is it family?
Enjoy failing. I hope we can enjoy family. How do we get to the point where we can enjoy failure? Just keep. See, this is where the fun part comes in, because I know the words to use. How do I get myself to feel that in the moment?
Confidence, you start not viewing failure as like such a blow to your ego. It's more like playing a game, you get to try again.
You bring up a really good point. I don't think most of us would care about failing if we didn't care about people's opinions.
I was thinking about that too, like, it's not so much how do we change our thoughts and feelings on something. I think to get deeper into it, we need to figure out why is the other part important to us? Why is it important to us that we focus more on the outcome than the actual activities? And once we get to the heart of why that's important to us, then we'll be able to pick apart and drive into how do we make it so we can enjoy the process.
Yeah. There's nothing. Trust me, I don't enjoy the process all the time. Yet I've come to the place that there was a specific year where I was a team leader and we set some significant goals for the market center. And I would take a retreat at the end of every year and I would review everything. We hit every single goal that I set. How long did I enjoy that? It was shitty. It took, cool, I hit all the goals. What's next? And in that moment, what the thing that resonated the most is, I wonder what my team, it makes me emotional. I wonder what my team thinks of me right now. I didn't celebrate once throughout the year. And then you realize you do that to yourself all the time. That's not why I'm in this business. I've learned that the process is way more important than any outcome. And I've gotten to a place like, look, we're not for everybody. This brokerage isn't for everybody. Not everybody's going to like me. Cool. That's a tough place to get to, but once you do, there's a lot of, you actually start to give yourself more freedom to go do things that may not look great on the outside. But I'll go back to Brene Brown's, like, if you're not in the ring, I don't really want to hear your opinion.
But don't you think it has a lot more to do with your mindset?
No
than
question.
anything? It's like, I had a house go live on Friday and I thought it was a great property and I was super excited. And the first and I had 13 showings scheduled, and the first feedback I got at 8 a.m. said, don't like the house, too chopped up, you know, not ready to offer. And then the next thing I got was a cancellation for somebody not showing, saying that, you know, and I was like, I'm just gonna keep my positive mindset, everything's gonna work out. Well, yesterday I ended up with 10 offers.
10.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
But look at the two things that happen.
Yeah, right away.
How quickly that spirals downward. Your goals aren't any different. You try it 2 times and say that doesn't work. Either you're looking for an easy way out, or your mindset is you need some people around you to help you. If you
I think
notice,
that's the biggest part of it. You need some people around you, because a lot of times when we're setting those goals, we don't have a great idea of what they necessarily should or shouldn't be.
Yep.
Without the people around us, it's not even reassuring, but it's helping you process and think through things. To me, that's the piece of the culture. That's having the people around you to push you, to celebrate with you, to dig into those things. Like, that's the biggest part.
yeah. For those that have experienced it, understand the value. For those that haven't, that's just a bunch of woo-woo. I don't need that. I promise you, you're way under your potential if you're trying to do this by yourself. I just believe it. Because we undersell what we think we're capable of, and we don't have other people speaking into us in a way that. How many of you had somebody in your life speak into you and they saw you much further along than you see yourself? Do you remember that person? That person is one of the most valuable people in your lives. Now, if you're not conscious on surrounding yourself with those types of people, you're selling yourself short.
The book Big Potential talks about the science behind it in our brains. If you stand in front of a mountain and you look at it by yourself, it looks X percentage of degrees steeper than they studied. If you're standing at a mountain next to somebody, it actually looks less steep.
Yeah.
There are a few different studies like that in the book to say that there is something about our brains that feels like we can accomplish more when we're together than when we're alone. And the power in community. I mean, that's the point of that book, Big Potential, but it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you notice, what's most of my training about? Not typically a lot about real estate. It's around leading ourselves, because I don't think the issue for most of us is how to do something. It's getting ourselves to do it long enough to develop the skill set to get there. I think that's the bigger issue. So most of my conversations are more around how are you operating as an individual, that you can find alignment between what's important to you and your goals, because everything else you can take care of. Where people start to hate goals is where they're almost being pushed to hit goals that they thought were important. They're not important anymore, but they keep getting pushed to do it. I'd hate goals too if I was striving for something that I didn't care about. So there's this delicate balance of alignment that if you don't have alignment, I promise you're going to get frustrated with goals, because now it's become the enemy of, now I'm doing something that I don't want to do. This is frozen again.
Oh, geez.
So,
The people on Zoom can see what you.
I just want to make sure everybody in the room can see the actual document. Well, they'll have them there. So could you actually start throwing them in? Not wanting to set goals, it allows for flexibility without guilt.
What did you say? I'm sorry, I didn't hear
It
you.
allows for flexibility without guilt. So if we don't set goals and we don't create a plan, we have more flexibility and we don't feel bad about it. So it gives us a little bit of freedom. Now, I say this every time, why do people get into the business? Two reasons: freedom. What's the other one? Money. Oh, I get so passionate. I'm just gonna hold back on this one, guys. No, I'm not. What do people mostly put first?
Freedom.
How are you gonna make money if all you have is flexibility? Doesn't work. You get to create your own schedule. That's not true. You've got to put the most important things that are actually going to drive the business as a non-negotiable. We'll talk about the calendar. Probably start moving a little bit. It doesn't require any discipline, and it actually gives you short-term comfort. To not set goals, you get short-term comfort. Okay. But I promise you, short-term comfort is going to lead to what? Long-term pain. It's funny, all of a sudden, Mark Willis, anybody know who Mark Willis is? Mark Willis used to be the CEO. He's one of my favorite CEOs that I've ever been able to have a conversation with. He said, I would rather live a life out of inspiration than obligation. And basically what he was saying is, I'm going to go do the work proactively on the front end so I don't put myself in a terrible position where I don't have any other options. I see it in this industry a lot where how do we get ourselves to take action when it doesn't feel as urgent? But think about how you change your patterns when you don't have any money. You'll go to work pretty quickly, like, I got to figure this out. What happens when health shows up? We can be proactive in taking care of ourselves, or we're going to have to deal with it at a certain point in time if we don't take care of ourselves. So think in a way that you can set things up in a way that you get to have a choice to move yourself forward versus something else being placed on you where you have to do something at a certain time. I don't love when I'm at a place where I have to do something because I didn't do a bunch of stuff leading up to it. I show up, I'm not as good at it, I'm not as happy, I don't get the best results because of those first two things. So, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm gonna keep going. All right, so this is the one I actually wanted to be on here. All right, so does everybody have a copy of what's called the 411? Forgot something here. If you want to live a special life, you have to do special things. But we don't understand what special things mean. Special thing is consistency. There's not a lot of consistent people in this world because it's boring. It requires discipline. We got to do it when you don't want to, when you don't feel like doing it. But I promise you, if you want to build anything significant, if you want to have better health, if you want to build wealth, consistency is required. Wealth is all about compounding. It's not about a quick hit where all of a sudden you're wealthy. It is saving $100 here, investing $100 there, where we minimize the small consistency that needs to show up for the compounding effect. Same thing with health. You can start for 3 months and not see a whole lot of results. You're going to hurt a hell of a lot more than you used to, but eventually that just builds off of itself, and you get to understand your body and how you need to work it. Right? All right. So I'm going to walk through this tool. We're not going to get through all this. How's that reassuring? All right. So the 411 tool, the basic premise is 4 weeks, 1 month, 1 year. So when you look at the spreadsheet you have, on the bottom, it's got week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Okay. Then we get to the monthly, which is this row or group of rows, and then the annual goals. Okay. So it's chopped up in 2 different ways. We've got the weekly down here that isn't categorized, but your monthly and annual goals are categorized in these columns. So you have business, you have job, which I'll go through the description. You have business, job, personal finance, and personal. I want you to take notes on this because these are the questions I get the most. What's the difference between business and job? Business is the outcome you're searching for. So I gave you 2 of them. I gave you a blank one and I gave you a mock one of a realtor. And hopefully give some context around what would go in these categories. So, and for the people on leadership teams in here, I'm passionate that you guys understand this tool so we can share the value of it with more people. So the business is the outcome you're searching for. So what do I mean by that? It is, how many closed units do I want to have? How many listings do I want to take? How many buyers do I want to work with? It's the outcome that is created through the work that we do. Okay. Job. That's exactly what it is. It's your job. So what is your job? I feel like a college professor right now.
Yes.
Weird. I don't like that. What is your job as a realtor?
Lead generate.
Okay, lead generation. That is like the main thing. But it's also setting appointments. It's making calls, like that's lead gen, but what's the intent behind the lead gen? And there's how many different ways to generate business? 7. There's a lot. So what I'm going to encourage you is I want this to be almost the most boring tool that you could possibly have by narrowing it to just a handful of things that you're going to do. The idea of what shows up on here is when we're filling out goals, like at the beginning of the year, what do you guys feel when you're setting goals? Super excited, can't wait for the year, and you add 15,000 things on your list, and I'm going to crush this year. And then you realize there's not enough time in the day. We overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 5. So what I'd like to encourage you to do is 3 or 4 things in any one of these boxes. Once you get up towards 5 or 6, unless you're familiar with the tool, like I could show you mine, but I think it'd be a bad idea because I've used it since I came to KW in 2010. I know, like I can picture almost the whole tool in my head and what goals are where because I look at it every single day. So, any questions on the difference between business or job? Any confusion? It's like the first time I've taught this that nobody's had questions. Don't worry, we'll get back to it. Personal finance can be income. It could be how much money do I want to donate? It could be how much do I want to invest? It could be I want to buy a property. It's anything that's with regards to either your income or your investments or building your wealth. Okay. And then personal It's relationships, it's vacations or hobbies, it's health, personal development. That's typically what I throw in the personal side. And I showed mine to somebody this morning and he let me have it because as sad as it sounds, you guys like me, right? It's important that people like me. I have to put dates with my wife in that column because I know how quickly things move between business and kids and stuff that, and I'm going to give full disclosure. I am so far behind on that goal. I don't have another goal on that whole spreadsheet that I'm further behind on. And he pointed it out to me this morning. He's like, that's bullshit. Okay. You got to swallow that one and you got to go. And now I got to do something. Like it's good to have somebody look at it and kind of rattle you a little bit and say, this is not okay. You put it on there. And that's one of the, if not the most important relationship that you have. So it seems, I remember showing that to somebody years ago and they said, you got to put dates on there? What's wrong with you? I was like, when's the last time you went on a date? I don't know. Well, you know, maybe you don't want to go on a date with that person anymore. I don't know. All right. So we good with the columns? Okay. So what we obviously want to do is we want to set the goals on a 12-month frame up here. And now what is important is that these goals funnel. If there's no correlation, what are the chances of hitting any annual goal if there's not a correlation in the monthly and weekly? It's zero. You won't do anything significant unless you do it every day or frequently. Okay. So, and then down here, you'll notice this is you guys will find other formats of this. I'm just gonna throw it out there. You can use a different format. I'm not tied to it, but this is what has worked well for me. Business and personal, to separate them, because I've also had people just put them all in the same category. And I think at least my brain, I need to be in a different setting when I'm looking at each category. Okay. All right. So I think I had there. So this is the other one you guys have. Have we shared this in the chat?
Not that one yet,
We'll
but
share
the other
the
one.
documents in the chat. Just giving you an example of how to look at things, and hopefully you can create something that's more driven by what's important to you. Do you have a question?
Nope.
Okay. Questions?
Not a question, but kind of sort of a question, I guess. So say somebody were to ask me, like, what is your goal? How should one answer that? Because I feel like, say I were to say my goal is 10 million this year, then you're like putting it out there and you're expecting to be held accountable. Do you feel like it's better to answer what actions you plan to do for that? You know, in terms of that fear of failure thing?
I wouldn't worry about that. What I mean, like what you communicate to somebody else, I think it's important to know what do you want to be held accountable to. That is going to be actions. What I would do is, if I was coaching, I would use the outcome as the barometer and ask you the questions. Do you think the activities that you have set are going to get you to that goal? Because we can navigate, like it doesn't have to be set in stone. If it's not working the way we thought it was going to work, then we need to make some adjustments. Does that answer?
Yeah. If someone asks you, what's your goal? What do you say?
Oh, I have a lot of them.
This is more the detailed tracking on a weekly data basis. You would still have your 1, 3, 5 that has a SMART goal.
The 1, 3, 5 is, if you haven't been introduced to that tool, is essentially you have one big goal. We have 3 main priorities and then 5 strategies under each. But this is your tracking mechanism. And it's a judgment, and I think I have a lot of data to support it. If you don't have an accountability group or a coach or anybody looking at this with you, don't start. And I mean that, don't start. Because you're just gonna waste your time. I don't know anybody that's continuously used this without being held accountable to it.
Question, a clarifying question. So I've been using a 411 for a while. And the 411s that I've been taught and that I use and I use in our accountability groups are obviously a lot like that, but instead it's big rock, productivity, and then personal. Is that a healthy substitute, or would you recommend reverting back to this model of it where it's business, job, or are those the same thing?
I created this beast myself. I'm aware of this, so I'm the one that said productive, personal, big rock.
Yeah.
It's a both and, because I think you're gonna have more than 3 goals in any week. Now, when you're in an accountability group, I think what it does is it heightens those 3 goals to the top priority. And others are still there. Just reading the message. So it's where I contradict myself and I can cause confusion. I think there needs to be a hyper focus on the most important things, but I think there can be a couple of other things on. Like, I wouldn't recommend more than 3 or 4 in any given week. Now, you could have a really significant goal on here. Then I would just say, just have that one goal. But we all know there's a lot of navigating and more than one thing that needs to get done. And now I get to confuse you even more. This is also not a to-do list. So if you got 15 things on here, not gonna serve it. You might as well just use a legal pad and just, which, by the way, I still do. I still have a to-do list. Guess what comes first, though? It's up on there. Have I thoroughly confused you?
I think that's an important distinction too, because I see that a lot as people will like host 2 open houses. Great. Are they scheduled? Yes. Well, that's a to-do. That's happening anyways. Like, that's not the goal.
Is there any reason you wouldn't do that now that
exactly.
you've already? And this is how our brains work, though. So I try not to judge those people, because if they haven't been through this process, I've gone through. I want to go on 3 listing appointments. You get to control that. And so this becomes super ambiguous when on a weekly basis, you're like, well, I didn't hold 3, but I set 2. And it just becomes this, like, how do I hold somebody accountable when there's so many ways out of it? What it's going to feel like is I'm judging that person. I'm just trying to get clarity. So if I can encourage you on how you set your goals on stuff that's completely within your control. And what do I mean by that? Rather than setting a goal on holding 3 appointments, what if you say, I want to set 3 appointments? Are you in 100% control of that? The actions, you absolutely are. But if you say, I want to hold 3 appointments, you're basing your goal on somebody else's schedule. Which, no, I say, like, don't judge people, and then I say the next thing I say is judge them. I'm self-aware to know it's not harsh, but I think our minds are so much in the place of trying to protect ourselves that we can justify things. So I want to hold 3 appointments, but I only held 1, but I set 3. So I technically hit it. No, you didn't. Because if you did that every single time, rather than 3 a month to hold 36 in a year, you held 12. And so my goal in any conversation is to create very specific clarity around what are you going to do that you wouldn't otherwise do. To Jason's point, what's the point of putting something on there that you already know you're going to do? What's the point?
I choose to put things on there that I know are gonna take me some courage to do.
Yeah, that's a good way to put
Oh,
it.
I know that I want to do this thing. This is the piece I know that I'm avoiding right now, and it's gonna take me courage to do. So I'm gonna put that on here. Cause I want somebody to say, hey, did you do that thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you said you look at this every day, but then you have your to-do list. But then, like, with your wife, you said you're not setting that date.
Thank you for this.
No, no. I'm just wondering, like, how in your day do you do the things here first versus your to-do list?
We don't have to do all the things all the time. What is a non-negotiable is what's the thing that moves your business forward? What is it? Lead generate, developing relationships. So if that's not blocked on your calendar, what are the chances that you're gonna actually hit your productive goals? It's pretty slim. So when I say this, I'm gonna block, we all have the to-do list that we can hammer through. I would still block that off, but it's not coming at the expense of the top 20%. I want you guys to hear me loud and clear on this. 90% of the stuff that we do doesn't matter. And I never used to believe that until now. Because it's amazing what experience does on what we think is going to fall apart doesn't necessarily fall apart if we stop doing something. Unless it's lead generation, then everything will fall apart. So I want us to get clear on anything that goes on the 411 should be on your calendar. There should be a space for it that's allocated to doing those activities. So I don't know if that, it's kind of like a phase 1, phase 2, where phase 1.
I guess the thing that I'm asking you is, you know, how do you make sure that you accomplish those things versus your to-do list?
This takes the stuff on my 411 takes priority over the to-do list. The to-do list is the piddly stuff.
And then the things that you're not choosing to actively do, it's just because you're choosing, right? Like,
Yes, and that's also a challenge we have because life.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, we have to decide what doesn't have to get done or what does somebody else need. That's the hard decision because when we flip-flop the urgent, I don't know if I have it on here. I don't. Is anybody familiar with the 4 quadrants?
Yeah. So
it's Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants, and essentially it's urgent and important. I'm gonna draw this. If you guys gotta leave at noon or 1, whatever time it is, I won't be insulted. But we have 4 quadrants, and on the top left is urgent and important. Top right is important and not urgent. Then we have, let's see here. This one's not important and not urgent. And then this one is, let's see, what am I missing? Urgent, not important. Okay. So this one we all know, not urgent, not important. Just get rid of it. Now, bless you. What happens is when we prioritize urgent and important, your life looks like your hair is on fire all the time.
Yeah.
But you might feel productive here and there. But I promise you, your business will suffer at some point in time. And what happens is we're actually programming our brain to chase stuff because it makes us feel good. When in reality, what is important and not urgent? What are examples of that? Generation. Lead generation. What else? I already gave you an example.
Right.
Date nights with my wife. Can't post this now.
Too early.
But you see the challenge mentally we have here. We have, this involves other people putting stuff onto us. And this is us taking a decisive stance on what's most important to us. So what are you going to decide? Because the challenge becomes somebody might not like you. Somebody might get upset with you. Sorry.
people pleasers beware.
Yes, this is the most dangerous. Now, are there things that should be over here that need to happen? I'm not suggesting just ignore this. I am cautioning you on labeling everything that you're labeling in this quadrant, that it actually is that way. And how do you take some urgency out of the desire of other people putting urgency on you? How do you do that? It's communication of expectations. I promise you, and you guys, I love you all. And just anytime I say that, you know something hard is coming. When our leadership team doesn't put on a listing because you promised the client that the listing was going to go on tonight and you didn't get it in time, and now you mistreat the front desk, whose fault is that? I get upset about this. And I'm not calling you wrong, but you have to understand the only reason you're pushing that person is because you didn't set proper expectations with the other person. If you say this will be on tomorrow or the next day, they already know. Now you're not carrying the pressure of urgent and important because you set the proper expectation. It's amazing how much we can actually control more of our business and our time if we were very, very intentional with this is the process, this is what you can expect, and this is how we're going to move forward. Everybody still okay with me?
I would say also making sure you understand the process. So if there's things that you don't understand, making sure you get clarity before you even try to communicate a process.
And or communicate that you're going to get more,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So we actually can minimize this by simply communicating in a way that lets people know what's next. I tell people never leave a meeting without letting them know what's next. Because when you don't let them know what's next, they're just going to make assumptions that you need to be doing more faster. Which isn't cool either, but they just don't know. I've done the same thing when people have, I got to get insurance on something. Okay, here, just fill this out. I'm assuming it's done. And 3 days later, I get an email back saying, hey, you still have these 3 things to sign. I was like, I didn't know. Would have been nice to know.
I also think as humans, we sometimes gravitate towards the urgent and important because it makes us feel good. We get this gratification when we get a solved problem or, whatever that looks like. So we gravitate towards that because it's a lot more
tangible and it's selfish. Which sometimes that's good, go with it. But if that's how you operate, your significance isn't going to be part of your future. Because if it's always urgent, the reality is none of these things line up in a way that compounds. This does. This just gives you a zigzag. It's just a realization I had. This takes you in a lot of different directions that don't have any rhyme or reason. This is your 411. You don't need to put the urgent stuff on your 411. You need to put the stuff that's not urgent to get ourselves, like Jen said, something that's going to take courage. It's not urgent, but it's important. Okay? Enough.
Jake, can we go back to the to-do list versus the 411?
Yeah.
Would you agree with this? Because this is my interpretation. You
Is
can't
this
really.
a trial close? Would you agree with me?
Come on out, man. So my interpretation of this is that turning your 411 into a to-do list is counterintuitive. It's not productive.
It doesn't.
And those pieces that go in your weekly need to funnel up and support your monthly and support your annuals, right? So when you identify the things that need to go in your weekly, that's how that should be. Your to-do list, on the other hand, could be everything else. But to answer your question, what works for me in my brain is that I can have my 411 activities on my to-do list. So it's all in one spot. It makes sense. I can't have my to-do list on my 411. Does that make
100%.
Is that
Yep.
more clear?
Yep. Absolutely.
Can I take a little side tangent for a second? You mentioned the 135,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And my understanding is that any goals I put on this should contribute to my number one, right? My number one goal answer is why. Why am I doing this? Why am I in this business? Why am I here on this planet? Whatever your answer, your why is. Everything that's on here helps me achieve that or helps me live in that every day. So I'm not going to put game and market mortgage payment on my phone. It's pretty an auto pay, like it's already been habit, right? But putting things that are urgent and important on this list are something that are reactive to something else that's coming in, right? So focusing on the important and the not urgent quadrant is what could be on the 411 because that's what's essential and that is what is needing where you want to go.
100% agree with all of that. Yep. Yep. That makes plenty of sense to me. Okay. Because the time I'm not going to do that. This is kind of going back to our original question or my original statement. This idea that everything's going to go like this when we set goals, I think sets us up for failure in the first place. Now, if you go into this having an expectation that you're going to fail, I don't care about using that word. I'm not like, we've got to just loosen our relationship with avoiding failure. Failure is going to be part of the process because we get to learn. And then we have the opportunity to improve. Now you do this over and over and over again. What's the general trend? It's still this, it's just not a straight line. So if you're failing at something, I'll come give you a high five. You're like, what the hell would you do that for? Because you're trying and you're learning. This is a learning process. This is how it needs to work. So anytime you're kind of hitting a wall, just remember this. It's just part of the process. You don't have to judge. This is normal. For anybody that's doing anything significant, show me somebody that hasn't failed, and I'll show you somebody that hasn't tried. Okay? All right. So I want you to, some of you might know what this is, but I do want you to be very specific on this because, well, that's the first word. Any goal that you do put on your 411 should hit this test of SMART goals. It's specific, you can measure it, it's action oriented, meaning there's an action you need to take. It requires some end result that you're looking for. And obviously it's time bound, which within this tool, there's time behind everything that you put on that. So we need to make sure any goals that you set, if they don't match any of these, you're giving yourself an out. Whether it's on purpose or not, you're giving yourself an out. Any questions on that? Okay. Where am I? I don't even know where I am. Oh, okay. You gotta answer these questions. What are you looking to accomplish? So whatever that answer is needs to be a SMART answer. SMART with the acronym, right? How are you going to achieve it? So you have the outcome, and then you have what are the activities, like how are you going to go about accomplishing it? And then when are you going to accomplish them, which you just need to allocate time in your calendar to do them. If you can answer those questions, the likelihood of you starting to take action is much, much higher than if you leave it ambiguous, and I'll get to it. Okay. Gosh, so funny. I had a feeling this was gonna happen. People say time blocking restricts my flexibility. Who gets to set up your calendar? Don't set up as a freaking prison then. You've got to negotiate with yourself a little bit. In any given day, you're going to have free time that you should make for yourself, and you're going to have responsibilities. We shouldn't aim for a day where we're not making our situation better for ourselves. So if we can't accept that every single day there's certain responsibilities that have to hit our calendar, we're going to have a bigger issue. At a certain point in time, our time is going to be dictated by somebody else because we're going to be out of the business. I say that lovingly, but we can't have flexibility all the time and expect to do great things. So I call it just negotiate with yourself. Just give yourself 20% responsibility throughout the day. It's funny how that fits. Everything else will take care of itself. We kind of had the urgent and proactive conversation already. Don't assume that a fully blocked day is productive either. This is a misinterpretation. Like, I know people in here that I know people that say I work 12 to 14 hours a day and they don't make any money. And I know other people that can work 6 to 8 hours and they're super productive because they only do the things that is going to drive their business forward. So I do it too. Like, social media can eat up a half hour pretty quickly. Like, you'll find me there every once in a while. All right. Give yourself grace. But if you do that too often, that's when it becomes a challenge. I wrote this down. It kind of goes back to the obligation versus inspiration. People are typically at their best when they choose to take the responsibility of something versus the responsibility being forced on them. We have a choice on the things we want to be responsible if we're proactive. If we're not proactive, it becomes a forced responsibility because we're not making our situation better along the way. Okay. And most of you know, I think accountability is one of the great blessings that we can have in our lives if we choose to have it with the right people. We make terrible employees and even worse bosses. We by ourselves aren't typically going to get ourselves to do the things that are the most difficult to do. That's why a lot of top performers have coaches, because they already know what they're not likely going to do if they were just left in isolation. There's too much negotiating in the brain. Okay. What's the difference between hold me accountable and I'm accountable? Giving your responsibility, expecting somebody else to do the hard work.
Or you're saying that I'm doing this because if I don't do it, I'm gonna disappoint you. You're the one holding me accountable versus I'm holding myself accountable. And you're the one that hard to word it, right?
It is. It's funky, but I've got into coaching relationships with people that say, I want you to hold me accountable.
And then you do, and then they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And you're like, okay.
I hate accountability. I don't want to do this.
The I'm accountable person shows up and says, I'm gonna tell you right now, I didn't hit my goals. These aren't meant to be excuses. I'm gonna own X, Y, Z. Nope. And they're showing up to the conversation ready for it versus me like pulling teeth and dragging you up a hill to get you to hit your goal. I'm not gonna do that. Like, you've also got to be accountable versus hammer on me when I don't hit. I'm like, what? No.
Nobody wants to be hammered on.
No.
They think they do, but it becomes very judgmental. And when somebody says, I'm going to make 50 calls, and then they show up and they say, I don't know, I made probably 40. I was like, no, you didn't. You probably made 15. 15 feels like 50.
It does.
At least for me, it does. So I'm not blind to the fact, but when there's generalizations, the reality is you didn't hit it, because if you hit it, I promise you'd want to say, yeah, I hit it. Now you're trying to soften the pain, which I get, but it doesn't serve you. But being an accountable person shows up, as Jen says, with here are my results, here are the challenges that I face. If it's a good coaching relationship, I'll high five you. If you learn lessons from that, I would much rather have that conversation than you like try to fool yourself to work through it in a way that you're not actually gaining lessons on how your brain is sabotaging why you're not doing what you said you want to do.
I want to dot that I. The value of accountability is coaching. It is learning the lessons. It's going, okay, this isn't to hammer on you. If I ask, tell me what got in your way. It's so that you can start to understand, oh, that got in my way. So now next week, I'm going to take the learning and apply it. And so I didn't fail. I learned something and I grew, and now I'm moving forward. It's the value in accountability isn't just to check something off the list. It's to gain awareness.
And that's when people say coaching doesn't work for me. Either the coach was poor, which could be truly the case, or you didn't want to be held accountable.
I just like to say accountability sets structure.
That structure?
Yeah.
100%. It makes things very clear, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That makes sense. I like that. Simple. Who's in an accountability group in here? Okay.
Like that style after.
If I could encourage you, if you want to be held accountable, please get into one of those groups, not because you need to be held, well, you want to do significant things that you think other people valuable. There's autonomy can be dangerous. And I get the value of autonomy because we like that freedom. But ultimately you get to choose your goals. Nobody else is choosing them for you. So, okay. I'm kind of moving through these pretty quickly. So, valuable coaching and or accountability conversations. Obviously, we need to know the goal specifically, otherwise it becomes an assumption one way or another. This is on an accountable person. You need to track your progress. If you're not tracking your progress, I'm going to ask how'd you do, and you're going to say I don't know. What are we going to talk about? Okay. Understand the challenges or ask questions to dig deeper. This is where the learning piece comes in. The most valuable part of the coach that I have are the questions she asks me that I don't ask myself, particularly the ones that sting. Those are the best questions. I don't love them in the moment, but the reality is there's value in the ones. If something stings, there's a reason. There's a mirror to look in at that point. And what I want for all of you is to maximize those tough questions because it maximizes your potential. And then when your potential is maximized, guess what else? You get to help other people do the same thing. I see a ripple effect by doing it. My goal is to create more leaders, not more followers. And part of being a leader is being accountable. There's nothing more frustrating to me than somebody that leads in a way that they're not willing to do the work themselves. They tell other people to do it, but they're not willing to do it themselves. That's for me. Maybe not for you. Honesty with yourself and openness to being challenged. Obviously, checking your ego. Okay. And then we'll get here. This is actually from one of my leadership academies, and a couple of people have posted this after our session. Is looking for excuses is the first sign that you're in trouble. You're looking for reasons to wiggle your way out of a goal. Your goal is already in jeopardy. So it's not a problem, and it's an awareness thing. Like, okay, why am I looking for excuse? Have I given up on the goal? If you have, let's just own it there, because not owning that you're not actually committed to the goal is going to hurt your confidence anyway. So what are we accomplishing by avoiding that honest conversation with ourselves? And then what would happen if you relentlessly avoided looking for excuses altogether? That's where you maximize yourself. It doesn't mean you hit it out of the park every time. It doesn't mean you succeed every time. It means you're avoiding, or you're making sure that you're not missing anything along the way. Okay. All right. So at the beginning, one of my biggest things is to get us all to a place where we actually go take action. And I listened to a podcast and I thought, that's really good. He said, love is a verb, work is a verb, service is a verb. What's a verb? If they're smarter than I would, I needed to have it defined for me. I only know it now, person, place, or thing. What wasn't it? So when you think about everything that matters, love, service, it all requires action. You don't get to go do any of those things. Like you can share, I love you, but if you don't show it, it falls flat. Or if you say, I love helping people, but you don't help anybody, what are we doing? That's where the alignment, we've got to make sure that we don't just talk, that we're actually taking action on things. Our leadership teams, I'm hell bent on having a positive impact on as many people as possible. That includes growing our organization. I'm not shy about it. People used to say, all you care about is recruiting. That's bullshit. I don't agree with that at all. We have the tools and resources to plug into if you want. And if you choose not to, I'm still here for you. I care about you, but I can't help you because you don't want that. And that's okay. But I'm looking for people that want to grow, that want to take action, and that want to improve their lives and improve other people's lives. There's something very, very just intuitive about that for me. I realize I swear more when I get more passionate. Probably should be careful. It's happened more often lately. And then I asked the question, how would you show up if you were observed without any of the words you speak? So you don't get to talk and you're observing yourself. What's your interpretation of that person? Can't hear anything. You can't hear any of the words. The only thing you can watch is what you do. Does that person align with who you want to be? It's the idea of you're sitting at a park and you're watching a basketball game. Can you tell if they're keeping score or not typically? You can. It matters. If you're not keeping score, people are just kind of like, whatever. But you can tell when they're keeping score. Navigate that for yourself. Are you keeping score with yourself? Does it matter what you do? And finally, integrity is in the doing, not in the saying. Consistency in the actions we take and the decisions we make speak much more loudly than any words that we can use. To find alignment between your words and actions. Okay, 15 minutes late, and we still got majority of the room here. That's awesome. Questions, thoughts on the tool, anything that I can help with before we wrap up?
How's your face?
Like two people know what you're talking about. It's just like crazy. I took care of a bee's nest this weekend. No. Got one here, got one here, got a few over here. If you see me do this, I did it in the dark because that's when they're all like in their nest. So I was the guy with the headlamp on running around like, picture that one.
You're not allergic.
I wish you would video this.
Yeah. I bet you all would. Yeah, I don't have to stay inside for a reason. All right, gang. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Jake.
You did go on a date.
We are.